Welcome to One Sharp Sword, cutting through to what matters most. I'm your host, Dr. Wayne Purnell, Dr. P, the outfluencer and your powerful presence mentor. Today is super special. I have a friend joining me. She is one of the people that I got to see during our TEDx presentations. I'm looking for the word colleague, friend, partner in the TEDx arena. Kate MacKinnon is joining me today. She has an amazing background, and her story is it's something that I think we all need to be paying attention to. Kate is a former vice president at JPMorgan Chase. She had worked her way into that position, obviously. I mean, it's not something you just sort of land in. And then she ended up running her own management technology company. And at some point decided that there was a little more to what she could bring the world. And she began to help women specifically step into their power and greatness. And somewhere along the way, she also stumbled into and then began studying intently the art of Feng Shui. And she is now a certified Feng Shui practitioner under the Grand Master. So Kate has actually helped me create my space. And there's so much more flow. I was in this little cramped space. Before I go on and on any further, welcome, Kate, to One Sharp Sword. Welcome.
Thank you. Do I get to call you Dr. P?
Dr. P. Dr. P. You can call me Wayne. You can call me Hey
Wayne,
You.
Dr. P. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. So your story, oh my gosh, there's so many lessons that any of our audience can take from your journey. And that's the reason I asked you, is because, you didn't get into banking by accident, right? You didn't land as a vice president at JPMorgan Chase accidentally. And your bounce happened somewhere along the way, and you became someone who, instead of tracking numbers and such the way you did, and people and projects, you're doing it differently in people's lives now. You're really making a very big difference in a very different way in people's lives. And I think this journey of transition is something that's going to be really important to share. So talk a little bit about, how'd you get to JP Morgan, and then what happened that you decided that that just wasn't the right path for you?
Well, I love this question because there is so much to it. And, really starting way back when, really when I'm going to go back, I'll start in college, but before that, I've always been an artist. And when I was a kid, and I'm looking at school, actually, when I was looking at going to colleges, I thought I might want to go to art school. I was thinking I wanted to go to Rhode Island School of Design, or maybe wanted to be interior design. And my parents actually said I should get a liberal arts education. And I think this is common for a lot of artists, and kind of do art on the side. And, kind of a background to that, I grew up with a professional family. My father was a doctor, my mother was a nurse. And so there was this very sort of traditional idea of careers, if you will. And so when I went to college, I went to a really great school. What I didn't know was I went to a school that was a coordinate college, so men, women. And so I'm of the generation, I went to school in the 70s when it was still sort of early feminism. And what I didn't know was I was a feminist probably from a little kid. I had 3 older brothers. I had to kind of speak up. I played football with them. I had to play softball better. I had to do everything sort of bigger and better than them. I was the youngest of the 3 older brothers. And So when I went to college, it was in an environment where it really encouraged young women in leadership roles. I took advantage of all the courses, and I became a psych major, actually, which is one of my big interests in learning
A what major?
disabilities. A psychology major.
Oh, okay.
And I minored in art and women's studies. I didn't officially, but I took courses, a lot of art courses in women's studies. And when I graduated, I thought I was going to be, I was at the time, like, this is pre-technology, right? As we know it, where it's like go into a library, open a book and say, what do you want to be? And so I went down a list and I said, well, either a psychologist, because I was trained for that and I was ready to go to graduate school, or a dean, because I was very admiring of the dean of my college. And my first job was in Barnard College in their admissions office. And they literally, that first year, I was the receptionist. And I thought I wanted to be an admissions counselor. They brought in, it was an IBM System 6. It was an early word processor, but it was like a computer word processor. And I was the backup operator. And when they put me onto the computer, I had an aptitude. I didn't know I had an aptitude for technology. I see things in multi-dimensions. And I love the idea of data and merging text and data. And they took me off the front desk. They said, you're a great receptionist. We're going to put you on this. And I always say I learned everything I ever knew about technology from that experience. I learned conceptually. I'm a very conceptual, process-oriented learner. And this was, I always say I'm a Stephen Jobs age, Bill Gates. So this was early technology. And I decided then that, I was in New York City. I'm not going to be a dean. I'm not going to be a psychologist. I discovered commercial arts. So I explored graphic arts, and I freelanced as a graphic artist and a word processing operator, and was very, very successful. And so I got to explore all these different companies I worked for, but a company that hired me to be a word processing operator. I had this boss that turned out to be she was a great mentor. She saw in me things that I didn't see in myself. She saw I had aptitude. So I have math, I have science, I'm a very sort of left brain, right brain, whole brain person. And she just kept saying, do you know what feasibility study is? I'd say, no. She goes, okay, you're going to learn it. Do you know how to do this? Do you know how to do a project plan? Do you know how to do? So on this word processing computer that I was working on, I said, this should really be on a regular computer. And she said, okay, well, we're going to have you migrate it from this word processor to a computer. And so everything I learned was on the job. And I thought I was going to work for her forever. And after 7 years, she said, Kate, you're not going to grow any further here. She goes, you need to be working for a bank. Basically, I was a business systems analyst before they had a name for it. She goes, banks hire people like you. She said, you have the communication skills and you have the technical skills. And she said, you're very creative. And she saw for me. So I say that because having a mentor like her was key in all of this, because she saw it. She gave me opportunities. I mean, I learned how to fix computers. They had me, I was in a legal department. They had me bring in the Nexus Lexis and make recommendation for software. And they just gave me all these opportunities that I had no idea because I was of the generation. So here I was, a young woman in technology. When I applied for jobs, they were basically, we need an assistant or we need this. And I said, well, I didn't go to college to become an assistant. I have so much more to offer. And so it took me about a year, but Chase was looking for someone like me. And when something's right, literally went for the interview. They were like, you're exactly what we're looking for. And so in 1988, they hired me. And I just had this amazing experience where I was on some wave, right? Like technology really started taking off. And I just kept being given opportunities. And very often, this is an important part of my story too, about the women piece, because very often I was the only woman in the room. I'm going to tell you one of my favorite stories because, I worked with a lot of men in technology and women too, but mostly men. And, at one point I was at a staff meeting and my boss looked at me, and I don't know where this came from. I feel like it came from maybe 3 years old on. I just knew it. He was going to tell a joke. And I looked at him and I said, if you have to think twice about telling a joke, don't tell it. And all the men got all uncomfortable. Like I knew he was going to make some sexist joke, right? And he looked a little ashamed and he stopped. I never, in all my experience with all that, there must have been something about me that just like said, don't even go there with me, because in all the years, I had great relationships, smart men, engineers, and I loved it. So that part of me that's a science mathematician loved it. But there was always this part of me that was still looking for the artist in me, like, where can I, even though this was a very creative way of being and being in business and learning banking. I mean, I didn't know anything about banking, but I learned it all on the job. I learned the business. Somewhere in there, I was still looking for that creative thing, and always working with coaches. I've worked with coaches almost my entire career. And at one point, I tell this story in a talk I did recently. I think that you heard this in the talk, that I was working with a coach and she asked me what I thought about at 7 when I went to sleep at night. And this is after I'd done textile design. I'd done a lot of different art things along the way. And she said, when you were 7, what did you think about at night? And I said, rearranging people's homes and buying furniture for my best friend's dollhouse. And she was the one who actually said, so this is like mid-career, right? She said, have you ever heard of Feng Shui? And I said, I had not. And I was planning a business trip. And she said, why don't you take a bus tour of Hong Kong? I was going on a bus to Hong Kong. And she said, look at it through the eyes of Feng Shui, which I did. And I just got it. Like I just got it. And something called to me and I listened. That's all I can say. It was a very powerful, transformational experience. I came home, and again, it wasn't really here in the West that much. I was like trying to find where I could study, and I finally found a school with Grandmaster, His Holiness Grandmaster Professor Lin Yun, who was teaching a program. And so at the beginning of 2000, I studied it. So I was still at that point, I had been an employee of Chase, and then I became a consultant, and they kept hiring me back. And then I went back as an employee, and finally actually almost 4 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago, I decided it was time to retire officially from my corporate job and go do what I'm really passionate about. So I love my career. I had a great career in technology. I love my career, great experience. Chase is an amazing company to work for. And it was time for me to go on my own and start. I've been doing Feng Shui for 20 years, but really go on my own full-time online. And that's where I am today.
That's pretty amazing. Just the whole kind of evolution of Kate, it's like, and you said some key things that I want to just highlight, which is, one, you paid attention to your gut. There was the thing you were supposed to do, which pretty much aligned with the things that you wanted to do, which was awesome, right? A lot of times there's a sense for so many people that there's the supposed to, and then there's the really like, well, I'm aching to be bigger, I'm aching to do more. The good news also, I think, is that you did something that is really smart, that most people come to too late. Not too late, but late. And it's never too late to get a coach, right? To get a mentor, to ask for perspective. And I think that that's really important too, that you can't see your own life the way that someone else can. It's why the highest performing athletes have 4 to 6 coaches each. They're each looking at something different. The highest level performers, I know I've worked with senior vice presidents in multi-billion-dollar companies, and it's for the sake of, what can you see that I can't see, so that I can be better. And so for you to step in and go, well, I've always had mentors. It's like, that's awesome. I've always had coaches. I've always sought the outside view. That helps you grow, and you're so good at that. You've been able to do that. So I wanted to call those things out, that's really propelled you. And then, for for you to have your own voice and to not be afraid to share it. I think that's been amazing too.
Mm.
So
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've had let's talk resilience, right? Because you know what you just painted as a picture of growth and development and everything else along the way was like, well, and I was encouraged to do this, and well, I was riding this wave of learning everything new that was coming out, and that's exciting. And nobody's life is easy 100% of the time. In fact, it's through the struggle that we find our strength. And if you could talk about some of the places where you found the biggest lessons in your life, that's where the listening audience of One Sharp Sword, when we cut through to what matters most, it's like, okay, there was all this noise around me, there was all this disruption around me. In fact, darn it, I was the one that was causing it myself. And when we come to that, that's where the power comes, right? That's when we go, oh, I am reclaiming my power. So can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges you had and what you did to overcome them, um and how that's made you even stronger now, stronger as a Feng Shui practitioner, stronger as a coach and a guide for others?
I'd love to. I know we talked before, and I don't always tell this part of my story. So it's a really powerful opportunity because I always say everybody has a story, and I certainly have one of my own. And so, go back to somewhere I came from. I did a talk on this a couple of years ago, and it was really powerful for me to finally articulate. I had. Um, I would say that I had a lot of challenges, along the way. Just the nature of my life, where just starting at a year and a half, I had meningitis and loss of hearing in my left ear, and which is actually became more apparent as I got older what that really meant. The sort of learning to navigate the world with just one ear, and it's sort of something that's invisible where people can't see it. But and I could, each one of these things I could talk a whole lot about, but I'm going to talk about each one leading up to what to me was the biggest challenge, of sort of building on that. And then my mother died when I was 4. She died of breast cancer, and it was very traumatic for me because I was there when she, was with her, and when she collapsed in the water. We were away for the summer,
Mm.
and my dad put her in the car and took her to the hospital, and she died shortly after that. And that was of the generation, well, they didn't think, tell children about death. And so I didn't know that my mother was not coming back for quite a while. I remember sitting at a Thanksgiving table, this was the summer, and sort of saying to my family, when's mommy coming home? And everyone just looked stunned, right? They just looked stunned. And so and then my dad remarried. So that was huge. I don't want to minimize. I'm going to kind of go through the steps, but
Yeah.
those two things alone in my early formative years really have influenced and colored me and given me so much, right? It's like challenges, but there were so many gifts in that. And I'll talk a little bit about that afterwards. But then, my dad remarried, my sister was born, and I had 3 older brothers at that point. And then my sister, I became like, sort of helping my stepmom, taking care of my brothers and sisters. My stepmom got sick with cancer when I was 10. So then they relied on me. So I was very, very responsible at a young age. And I was a good kid. I did what I was supposed to do. I did well in school. I didn't, all those things influenced me. So I didn't always feel that way about myself. But it wasn't until when I went to college, my stepmom, the cancer, it turned out, was terminal. And it was sort of during my college age, I took time off to kind of help out. And she died while I was home. He literally died in my arms. And my dad, after all this, decided emotionally to abandon our family and get involved with another woman. And so we were kind of like, by the time I was 21, it was a little bit like, what just happened, 21 years into my life. And people start drinking at college. I started drinking when I was 18, but I started drinking. It wasn't a conscious thing, but I started drinking. And what I discovered was I was so angry. I'd been abandoned. Felt tremendous grief, things that I had never really been able to experience as a child when I became a young adult. And I heard somebody say this, and I feel like, I probably drank to drown my feelings, but I found that they could swim, And so my 20s were very, even though I had a career, I was talking about it, and I was like sort of growing emotionally. I was just so angry and drinking. And I sort of reached a point in my life at 32. I remember waking up one day, and at that time I was married, and I was in a bedroom that was just like, dark blue walls, gray floor, and a black ceiling. And I always said it was like a bruise, right? Like I was in a bedroom, and I was really like, how did I get here? Like, how this young woman with all this promise, right? Like, how did I end up here? It just reflected how I felt. There was no light coming. Think about it from a Feng Shui perspective. There was no light coming in the window. And I always say that I ran out of gas and my battery died and I was empty. And my story is about being spiritually bankrupt. I was just empty. And I knew I needed help. When you talk about there was a point where I knew I needed help, and I got help. I just knew that, and my mother died when she was 34. And on some level, they talk about this, psychiatrists and therapists talk about, if you lose a parent at a young age, it's hard to imagine that you're going to live beyond that age. So I think there's a part of me that was sort of hard to imagine I was even going to live past 34. Right. So at 33, I stopped drinking. I got help, got a lot of help, and started rebuilding my life in a sober way, kind of really sort of growing up emotionally in some ways that I wasn't able to before, because I was just so busy taking care of everybody. And then abandonment and, anger. And so that challenge of really waking up, it was a real awakening for me, a spiritual awakening to put down alcohol and start living my life like in what felt like maybe for the first time really grounded. And I had a lot of feelings to deal with. I had a lot of help, a lot of therapy, a lot of people supporting me in this process to really, find out who I really was under all that. So all those things were true, but then there was who's Kate underlying all that? Who's Kate that lost her mother at such a young age? I mean, it's still, it's like one of those things I had a therapist say, at some levels, you never get over losing your parent. It doesn't matter how old you are.
Right.
So that challenge, and P.S., when I did that, around the time I did that was right around the time that I started my job at Chase. So, I put down the alcohol. I started this job. I was newly sober in this job thing. Every day they're going to fire me. they're going to find out they're going to fire me. And meanwhile, they thought I was going to quit. Like every time we'd have a conversation, they were afraid I was going to quit. I was afraid they were going to fire me, but it was just because I was so emotionally raw. Even though I could do the work, I had to grow up in a whole new way, if that makes sense.
Well, what's interesting is, I mean, in your 20s, there's sort of this invincibility, and it's sort of like, I'm going to explore everything and I'm going to be invincible. And in your 30s, it's sort of, you're in a space of trying to find out who you are anyway. And as you're coming out of a place of using alcohol to somewhat deaden the feelings, and now all of those feelings are coming back, and you're going, well, how do I sort this out on top of who am I? It's a very unique place to be. Plus, right? You add another decade, and it's sort of like, and another decade, and here we are. There's all the jokes about adulting, right? And we're supposed to know how to be adults, and it's sort of like, the real conversation is, you keep trying to figure that out, right? We're all still trying to figure that out. What does it mean to be in the world? And so to allow yourself to grow into who you wanted to become takes a good amount of fortitude. And I think, knowing you needed help was a big deal for you. And then the next step, getting it, is another big deal. And you didn't talk about relapses. I don't know your story, whether you had relapses along the way. So many people do when they make that decision, I'm done with alcohol. You're shaking your head. No, you didn't. So you found a path, and yours has been one where you find a path and you go, this is congruent for me. This is who I am. Awesome. That's what you grow into. So it allowed you to sort of become Kate the adult as you worked your way into a very adult job in banking. And then, only recently, I didn't know it was only recently that, the past 4 years that you shifted from that role entirely. So, wow, amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to say one thing about that, because it
Sure.
is really important to me, that whole idea of growing up, and the thing that I want to say that was true for me, sort of that moment of clarity, we say, like, what is that moment where you've kind of the one sharp sword, right? Is when I made the choice to stop drinking, it was like I knew I was choosing life over death. It was that dramatic for me. I knew if I kept going, I was killing myself. I just knew it. And at some point it was like, you see it in movies and stuff, like, no, I don't want to die. I want to live. Like, there was a point where I knew I had more that I wanted to do, and I wanted to do that more than just succumb. Do you know what I mean? On some levels,
Yeah,
it would have been
I want to
easier to just,
underscore that. Let me just underscore that,
yeah,
right? Like, I knew I wanted to do more than just succumb is a gigantic statement. And I think it's so important that at any point, and for the audience, as you're listening to this, just recognize there's more in you. And so the question of, are you succumbing to the supposed tos? Are you giving in to tolerating certain things that are in your life that you're just going along to get along? Because at some point you recognize, no, you know what? There's more in me, and I can't have more or be more. I can't do more. I can't serve more greatly if I continue down the path I've been on. I need to cut this part away, which is the one sharp sword. And the idea, by the way, just as a reminder, the one sharp sword is so much better than 10,000 dull blades, right?
Mhm.
With one sharp sword, it's a really clean, quick cut through to what matters most. That's what a decision is about. And when you make that decision, it's magical because the rest of your life opens up.
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely did. And it I used to say too, I sort of realized at a certain point in my life, there's a statute of limitations. Like, I can't spend the rest of my life blaming my parents from how my life had turned out, that I had to take responsibility. It was like, this is my life. It's not anybody else's life. And if I was going to live the life I wanted to live, I had to stop blaming everybody. And that was a huge, huge part. And part of it was I had to then, as part of my own recovery, have conversations with people about that. I had this interesting conversation with my dad, who used to sort of invalidate my experience. And at one point, and I sort of had the awareness, but then it's like you have the awareness, but then the challenge shows up where you get like, how committed are you? And so I have this awareness that my dad and I were going to have the same conversation, because I now understand as an adult, he made a choice to marry something to be our mother, to bring us up, because thank God I had my stepmother, but it was not easy because there was a lot of minimizing my experience of having lost my mother in order to sort of protect his choice of marrying my stepmother, who raised us and did an amazing job. But there was never the allowance to say, yeah, but I lost my mother, right? No, there was no room for that. Like, you have a mother. It's like, no, but I lost my mother. And so my dad used to sort of, every time I would say something that he felt in any way threatened his choices, he would just minimize. And one day, as I was going through this process, I actually had this conversation that was life-changing. Like, talk about stepping into being an adult. My dad, once again, one holiday said, oh, you always, he said, you always made your mother like the fairy godmother, and you made your stepmother the wicked stepmother. And I remember like sitting there, like sinking in, going, here we go again. And I had this moment. We'd been visiting my brother, and we were driving home in the car, and I could just feel myself sinking into the seat. And I got home and I went into the bathroom and I looked. I mean, it was like my life pain, like right there, like happening. And I looked in the mirror and I said, you could drink, you could kill yourself, or you could pray. And I prayed, and I didn't know what was going to come out of that. But I said, you're going to now go have a conversation with your father about this. And I went and I said, Dad, I mean, I don't even know where I got these words from. I said, Dad, that conversation we just had. He goes, yeah. I said, the one we've been having our entire life. He goes, yeah. I said, well, we're no longer going to have it anymore. He said, what do you mean? I said, my experience is my experience, and your perception of my experience is yours. But that doesn't make you right. And he said, well, but I'm your father, and of course I'm right. I said, well, no, actually you're not. You're my father, but my experience is my experience. And he was like flabbergasted. And then it led to this amazing conversation, by the way. And out of that conversation, my father and I never had that conversation again. And we ended up having an amazing relationship. That it changed, because it was that point of being like that. I was able to, I don't know, I always say, I don't know where that came from. Again, these things always feel like they come from my toes up, but it was like, we're not having this conversation anymore. And he was a crusty old coot, by the way, but I love my dad, and I learned to have a very different adult relationship with him. And that to me was like the miracle of all this, like to get to that point where I could say, no, we don't agree. Just because you're my parent or my father doesn't make you right. So there was very, very powerful stuff in all of that. So I felt
I love
compelled
that.
to share that.
Please,
Yeah.
thank you. That's awesome, because it is a common theme. And I think for those that have not yet stepped in to do this, there's a crucial conversation you haven't had yet, right? And so this is the encouragement, because what Kate just said was that when she dared to have the conversation about what's right for her, right? That her father has a perception, awesome, it's his. Other people have perceptions, awesome, that's theirs. When you dare to declare what's true for you, your life changes. Your life changes. And Kate, you said that you didn't have that conversation ever again. Never had to come up, because you tore through the veil of, well, this is the way it's supposed to be. Sort of this whisper of, well, it's, we don't talk about that. It's like, well, this is my experience. Of course we talk about it. This is my experience. I own this. Nobody can take that from me. And it's like, you stood in your power at that point. And it wasn't angry. It didn't sound like it was an angry conversation the way you described it. It was just you making a declaration. And I think so often when we think about, I'm going to tell the world what I believe, it sounds like it has to be some angry outburst. And it's not. It's a matter of, hey, you know what? You're allowed to think what you think. and I'll think what I think and just understand that they may be different. And it's like, that's awesome. It opens the world to you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So cool. Talk a little bit, if you would, about how you're helping women into their greatness a little bit more now, and also, boy, the just the world that I got to step into with you, that really changed the way I look at my business just by changing my environment. So if you could talk about Feng Shui, because um, it's kind of incredible just to step into my workspace and smile when I step into this room now. It's really great. So I always loved what I did. Now it's like I love where I do it. And it's really great. So talk a little bit about what you're up to now, and if there's some tips that you can give to the audience that some are listening, some are viewing this, just some ideas about what to be looking for, and how about this as a prompt? What's a bagua anyway?
What's a bagua anyway? Okay, well, first of all, it makes me so happy, and that you're, I can just see sort of, from the work that you've done. We work together, but you do the work that I can just I can see how it just kind of has opened things up for you. It's really lovely. So yeah, talk a little bit about Feng Shui for people who don't know exactly what it is. Feng Shui is the ancient Chinese art and science of placement, used to create harmony and the flow and balance of positive energy in one's home. It's really any environment. Just a little quick history. So literally means wind, water, which represents flow balance, what we call life force or chi energy. And it's been around for thousands of years. It was first started by first with the first homes and farms to select land, really land abundant in water, light, food, and all the things to sustain and support life and provide protection and safety. And again, I did a talk recently on this where our space, it actually reflects who we are. So I would say our home is a map of who we are, which people kind of are blown away by. But it's true that and I quote the psychoanalyst Carl Jung, who said, our homes are a symbolic mirror of our inner self, of our unconscious wishes and desires. So when I'm working with people, we in Feng Shui have what's called a bagua map that has been around, for a long time. And the sort of underlying purpose is it allows me, it's a tool to analyze your space and be able to determine how to best balance the energy in the same way that, originally it was about picking land that had, really, the things that sustain us. It's looking at your home and looking at the energy and the elements in it to make sure that it's supporting you, right? It's aligning with what you want in your life. It's aligning with sort of where you want to go in life. And so we're in sometimes a very literal sense and sometimes a very sort of figurative sense, bringing in that life force energy from outside into your home and supporting you. So Feng Shui is all about shifting and aligning energy to support you in your life and really having you align with who you are. I talk about the true north, like you align with your true north. So I call it coming home to yourself. So when people feel good in their space, it's because the space reflects them and they reflect the space. And there's this beautiful alignment. Energetically, everything we've sort of shifted in your environment is supporting you in being really what I call your best self, stepping into your power and greatness, right? And sort of being free.
I want to point something out real quick, and it is
yes.
By the time this episode comes out, it will be a few weeks past our recording. I will say that as you're talking about energy and foundation and release, I am here in Northern California, and we just experienced an earthquake. So it is very interesting. I'm sitting here and I'm like,
No way.
pretty
Oh my
amazing.
God.
Yeah. So it's very funny. It's like, ba, 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 ba. Okay, here we go. So, yeah. So there you
I'll
go.
have to think about that. Yeah, there you go.
So,
We could have
yeah.
a whole conversation about, wow, that's amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. But
Yeah. So loving the
yeah,
release of energy right here. Boom, in the Bay Area. I'll
yeah.
look up when and where. But it's,
As long as you're all
uh,
right.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's part of Northern California. It's part of what we do here,
Yeah.
ride it out. Um,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what you did with me in my space, like you talk about, your home reflects your home reflects who you are. Your
Right.
like the space you live reflects who you are. So, as you're listening to this, as you're watching this, think about the main space that you live in. Is it your workspace? Is it your living room, your family room? Is it the kitchen? Like, think about that. And here's what happened for me with Kate was, um, when I was introduced to the idea of doing feng shui, I had a moment of panic, like, oh my gosh, the entire house? I don't even know how to do that. Like, there's so much that I need to fix and clean up and move. And it's like, oh, that may be a little lesson. And so to focus back on, all right, let's start with a space. Let's start with one space. And it's the space that I spend the most part of my day in. And the way I had my desk oriented, the kinds of things that I allowed to accumulate, um, what I see every day, it's like it's so different now than what it was. And so when I come to my workspace, I come in a space of power now. I come to my workspace with direction and intent. I come to it with love and laughter, and all of that is balanced, and it's so good versus it feels like flow versus force, right? There's the whole concept of power versus force, and there's this power that flows when you allow it. And I think that is so huge, right? That's part of the chi-ness, right? That's part of the chi that flows, chi or ki in Japanese, right? So are there immediate things, like I'm looking at our timing here and I'm thinking, are there in the next couple of minutes, are there some key to-dos that our listeners can actually make use of? Like, if they were to
Yeah.
fix one, two, three things in their workspace, in their homes, what should they be looking for?
Right. So I'll sort of give a context and then give 3 tips, because yes, the answer is yes. Um, and to your point, I just want to kind of build a little bit off your point. So for me, space is space is space is space. So it could be your desk, right? It could be your room. It could be your house. It could be your lot. It could be your office. So that's why very often we say we talk about it in terms of your environment, so that it could be any number of things. So people come like you, where you could be doing someone's whole home and it sounds overwhelming, but when we work together, it's like you get a plan. Like, you're not just like left on your own, as you know, like get a plan. So it becomes very practical and concrete. And I think that's one of the things that I love about Feng Shui, is that there's this whole energetic undercurrent with very real, because we're surrounded by energy, so we're balancing the energy in our environment, but the things that you're actually doing are very concrete. So what I would say, and we'll choose the office, but it could be any environment, is so, and I'll talk about a couple of things that we did for you that I would say to anybody, right? If they were setting up a home office, or even where they, at this point, a lot of people aren't working in office buildings, they're working at their home. But So there's the first thing is I would always say clutter, right? Like very concrete. The most basic thing that we say to people, I say to people is, we collect stuff, but we don't realize that things have their own energy and they actually block us from having what we want. And so not knowing what to do or not, being afraid of letting something go or throwing it out, or you don't have a place to put it, it actually creates blocked energy. And you kind of almost sort of feel like you're barricaded in sometimes, like your body physically, like, do you know what I mean? Your shoulders go up, you kind of don't want to go over that area. You're a little bit like a pretzel, like, you have like where you just said, you go like this now, like, it's amazing, right? But that's not always the case. Like when you have all that stuff, it's like, oh, I have to step around it. And so that's actually stuck energy. People don't realize it's like, well, it's just things, but it's actually not. And so this is a little bit of Marie Kondo. People always talk about her. To me, it's interesting, but the idea of tidying is that she started because her mother did Feng Shui, and she said her mother never really looked at the clutter, and she felt like the clutter was the most important part. And I would agree with her. Like those are things that you can do now and start. The new year is a perfect time, right? Like to say, I'm going to take one space and I'm going to just start cleaning it out. One drawer at a time. I always say do one drawer at a time, right? Like one piece at a time, one cupboard at a time. If you get motivated, do more, but you'll start feeling the energy moving. And I know people feel this when they say, I feel so virtuous because I cleaned out a drawer in my kitchen, right? But there's actually an energetic thing happening where it feels good because you've just unblocked energy in your home. So we'll start with the home office. Like if you have a space where you're working, I always say organize your stuff, right? If you have a desk you're working, you bring it out when you're working so you have clarity. You're not bringing everything out. You don't have everything on your desk. And when you're done, you put it away. And, oh, yeah, it's a perfect time, tax time. This is a perfect time to start going through your papers and organizing your papers, getting rid of papers, right? This is all sort of clearing the clutter, which not only releases energy, but you get clarity.
It was so hard for me
tip
to
number
do
one.
that. That was so hard. Like I am one of those who there are different books that talk about clutter, right? And I'm one of those where if I can't see it, like if it's put away, I'm not going to work on it, right? And so for a very long time, I think I inherited this from my dad. Like he'd have piles and piles and piles. He'd have this massive executive desk, but you couldn't see any of it. Like everything was just piles of papers that he was going to get to. And so for me, like if I couldn't see it, I wasn't working on it. And now it's very different. Like I love being able to have space and choose what I'm working on, right? Being really deliberate. My calendar is mine, and so I use it to plan. And from that, my calendar then just will tell me what I need to bring out in a given time, right? And then I can put it back away. So I think that's one of the ways. Like you don't have to go through and go, oh my gosh, I've got so much clutter. It's take a space and go, well, where could I put this that if I really wanted to, I could bring it back out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's I love that. That's a perfect example. Right. It's like, where it is to go get it. You may have to go through a couple of things to say, what is it I'm going to work on today? Bring it out. When you're done, put it away. And I say this too at this time, during the pandemic. It's a little time sensitive, but I think it's still a good way of working, where a lot of people are working at home and they're using other things that are not their home office, right? They might not even have a home office. They're working at the dining room table. They're working in the bedroom, which we'll talk about that in a minute. But that, you don't want that stuff out all the time. Then you create a place where it's like, that's where you work for while you work. And then you put everything away. And then you have your dining room table as your dining room table. And that's huge. That simple act makes a big difference too. It's just it's a way of of being with your stuff instead of just leaving it out because that's where you last left it. It's like, no, pick it up. And so I say everything has a place and every place has a thing. Like just figure out where you're going to put it. It's where you go put it away. You bring it out. You know where it is. You can go find it. That's really big. The other thing that I wanted to say too, which your office is a perfect example, that you have. So this is now about what we call the commanding position, like giving you, empowering you. Like you have a wall behind you. Think about that. Like you have a wall. Your wall has your back, right? Like it empowers you by having what we call the command position. And again, when I did that before with the clutter, I used to work in these workstations where you, like you're sitting looking in and you can't see anyone coming. And by the way, because I'm deaf in one ear, I get startled because I don't hear people coming. And then suddenly they're there. And so I'd have this like, people would laugh, but it's like, I couldn't help it, like I didn't see you coming, but I was also sort of sitting there hunkering down. You want to be able to work and be open. And if you're in a place where you can have a wall, where you have it supporting you, where you basically want to be able to see the door where people are coming, right? You want to see people coming towards you, then it's something we did for you too. We create a mirror. So you can be sitting, have that great, beautiful wall behind you, but then you have a mirror where you can actually see. This is a real Feng Shui cure, by the way. You can actually see the doorway and you can see people coming in. That is so powerful. Just that alone. So we're empowering you, we're creating clarity. And then what I love is you have it behind you. But one of the great air purifiers and one of the great things of bringing nature into your space is having plants. No, this is a perfect time of year, right?
I have 4 in this room. You can only see one. So there's one up on my on my professional space. There's one in my fire space, and there's one in my love space. So it's I have them around me, and it's great, right? So in this you can see one that is behind me, but I also have 3 that are in front of me that I can see, and also the greenery just makes me happy.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to add, because if you're working in a workspace like you and I have like tips I hand out about workspaces and stuff like that. But some of the stuff sounds so obvious, but so important. So when we're looking at an office space, the 2 things that I just said were really important. But also have a good chair. Have a good chair, right? Like really have, like where you're working, if you can, have a chair that really supports you. And I always laugh at myself because I'm also just as guilty as other people to do things that I know better. And when I transitioned from working in corporate to home, where I had like ergonomically set desk, computer, chair and everything. And I came home, I was building my website within the first year. And I was working on a laptop instead of a monitor. And I was just sort of like hunkered down. I hurt my back because I didn't have the proper chair. I just didn't pay attention, right? I was just working long hours. So when you're working, it's important to have, again, the same way you have the wall to support you, you have a chair to support you, and that you have, you're sort of aware of how you're using your computer and take breaks, right? Things that you need to do to take care of your body while you're working. But the chair is really important. Your chair and desk, of course, but your chair where you sit is really important in terms of getting the proper support while you work.
This is awesome. So support, foundation, energy flow, and it's all about what makes you feel better. And I love that.
Yep.
Let's wrap up. What final tip or tips might you have? And if people want to know more about you and the work you do, and where can they find you, Kate?
So final tips are so many. I'm going to say 2 things. I do say this to people when I work with them. that listen to yourself, because I believe and I see it that on some level, when you're not comfortable, when something doesn't feel right, you think you're second guessing yourself, to really start trusting that knowingness, if you will, that inner knowingness, because we're surrounded by energy and we can feel its vibes, whether we know it consciously or unconsciously. And very often when I tell people to move something, they go, I knew I should have moved that. Right? They just didn't move it. So I encourage people to really start tuning into themselves, because on some level, they probably already know. Yes. And that I want to say, I know this is coming out in a couple of weeks, but in Feng Shui, everything we do is with intention. So so if you want to sort of create, you're thinking about what you want to create for the year, you're thinking about what you want to bring into your life for the year, to really think about it with intention, saying, because we say intention is everything. That my clients that my clients that I serve, who are perfect me and I'm perfect for them, are here for me now, right? Like, and have that intention. And it's so powerful just to kind of say that clarity. So I do everything with intention, by the way. So I encourage people, if you have a goal, or if you're thinking about the year and what you want your year to look like, to do it with intention, and you write it down, write it as if it already exists, experience it and visualize it. And it has a way of showing up in your life. You may not know what it looks like, but so intention is sort of my final tip. These are mindset things, but a really, really important part of not just moving and placing, but having the mindset. So I will leave that with you.
That's awesome.
That with you.
Very good.
And,
so listen to yourself and is huge, because so often it's like, well, listen to myself later. Right now, I need to get this done. And it's like, no, listen to yourself now, because that may take you on a different path, or it may actually help you on the path you're on to get done what you need to get done. And then do everything with intention. I'm a big fan of that, to be deliberately, actively, positively engaged and uplifting. To do everything with intention is huge. If people want to reach you, Kate, how do they do that?
Yeah, so the best way is my website, which is Kate, Kat-MacKinnon, MacKinnon.com. I will have available for you, I have what I call my Feng Shui 9 tips, which I like to provide people, which would be, again, Kate-MacKinnon.com /one sharp sword. And so it's 9 tips that you can bring into your life, and it will build on some of the things we've spoken about. And then I will offer one other thing. I do have a webinar if people are interested in learning about Feng Shui. And it's you can find it, it's bit.ly /Feng Shui home reset. And you'll be able to, sometimes people are interested in learning more and how do you apply it in your own life. So I encourage people to do it. It's a great webinar. It's a wealth of information. It has workspace information and things that we've talked about. So
that's awesome. I will have those links in my show notes that accompany this. KateMacKinnon.com, Kate-MacKinnon.com. And I'll make sure that that it is spelled correctly, /one sharp sword. Imagine that. You're going to get the Feng Shui. I always pronounce it wrong because of the way it's spelled.
Feng Shui. I know it's Feng Shui.
Feng Shui.
I like the way you say it, though. It's Feng Shui.
It's Feng Shui. Yeah.
Feng Shui.
I've been saying Shui all this time, right? So
Feng Shui.
Right.
It's a common. Yeah.
Here we go. So Feng Shui 9 tips. That's available for you. And then the bit.ly Feng Shui home reset I will also have that link. That's awesome. Kate MacKinnon has been my guest on One Sharp Sword. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much, Wayne. It really has been great. I just adore you, and it's just so great to be in your space. And it's been an amazing conversation with you. Thank you.
I
Thank you
feel
for
like
having me.
you're so welcome. I feel like we could have gone on and on and on. So, yeah, so great. Thanks, Kate. All right. This is One Sharp Sword, cutting through to what matters most.